So one of the things we ask ourselves as qualitative researchers is, did I get it right? Did I do it right? So, along the way, of course, we're reflexive. We're thinking about our research design. We're thinking about, bringing, ourselves as researchers as instruments and going through the process. But one of the things that we really haven't covered in class is saying evaluating what we've done. Now, if we set up our research designs consistently, and thoughtfully, then the evaluation, should be okay, right? But as we know, qualitative research is messy. Okay, we're committed to an emergent design. We get our hands dirty, right? So it's super messy, and we want to always evaluate what we've done, where we've come. And so today I want to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the strategies. Okay? How do you do it? But I think I really want to talk a little bit about what they are and then where they come from first before we get to, okay, what are the practical things that we do? Okay? And as in every presentation, almost every presentation I've made for you this semester, we go back to the philosophical assumptions, right? So let's go ahead and review those in the context of evaluation. Okay? So philosophical assumptions. We're going to be consistent, okay? We understand the nature of qualitative research in several different ways. So let's just review those really quick before we go on to the whats and the whys and the hows and so forth, okay? And one of the things in terms of what we want to look at is ontology. Okay? View of reality, okay? And in qualitative research, we acknowledge that there are multiple views of reality. There's not one reality. There are multiple views of reality. So we're going to be true to that in our research design and also in our evaluation. Okay? Another thing we're going to think about is epistemology. How do we know what we know? And we have we know. How do we know what we know? What is knowledge? How do we construct knowledge in terms of epistemology? All right? Axiology. What are the values that we bring? Because we acknowledge that qualitative research is value laden. What are those values? Okay? How do we stay true to values in our qualitative research? And we acknowledge that researcher is instrument, lots and lots of layers of value and ethics going on there. And the other thing is methodology. And in terms of methodology, to me, you've got this ontology leads to epistemology, leads to axiology. To me, methodology is how all of these things become reality or become known, okay, come to the surface. So even though there's a connection, and this is an iterative kind of connection, and I'm not sure we can separate them, I don't think we can separate them at all, the choices you make in research, okay, your methodology stems from all of these other philosophical assumptions and also is a philosophical assumption in and of itself. Okay, all right. So we've been over that again. So let's go ahead and take the next step and say, well, what is evaluation? How does the evaluation tie into all of these philosophical assumptions? And how do we know that we've done the right thing in our research? So in looking at philosophical assumptions that we make about qualitative research, multiple realities, multiple ways of knowing, the values that we bring, and then the methodology that we use as a result of that. There's some things that we need to think about in terms of evaluation to make sure that that's consistent and true, and kind of like, did I do the right thing? Did I do a good job? Now, early in qualitative research, the difficulty is finding a language that transcends. So can all researchers use the same language to talk about their research? So you will find that some qualitative researchers use the same language to talk about qualitative research as they do to talk about quantitative research. Terms like validity, okay? And you will see those terms used in evaluation of qualitative research even now. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But as Walcott and others found, the terms didn't quite match. And Lincoln and Guba, they said that some of the terms don't quite line up. So, it's kind of like fitting a square peg into a round hole. So qualitative researchers have come up with, some different ways of looking at evaluation. And I think, the Lincoln and Guba term that I think helps a lot is trustworthiness. What have I done in the study that makes it trustworthy? Okay? A little later on in this video, we're going to look at the evaluation strategies you can use to achieve this. Okay? But for now, I think I'd like to just look at, what does that mean? What does it look like? You can read a lot of research, a lot of methodology pieces on you should do this or you should do that. But let's take it back to the philosophical assumptions. If you design your methodology with the philosophical assumptions in mind, and you're consistent across the board, that trustworthiness is going to happen. All right? And one of the things you want to do is say, okay, I'm going to be very reflexive about the process. I'm going to approach it with the emergent design that I'm committed to with qualitative research. All right, so trustworthiness is really a good term to use. It's not the only term, but it's a good term to use. One of the other things that I like is Tracy's 8 big tent criteria for looking at qualitative research. And I'm going to go ahead and list these here because I want to talk about them before we talk about the strategies. And one of the things she talks about is worthy topic. Are you looking at a topic or an issue that is worthy of research? That really doesn't take a lot of explanation. Let's just go ahead and put it there. Also, in terms of methodology, is qualitative research the right way to look at a piece like that? Rigor. Do we have rigor in the study, in the design? We're going to look at the evaluation of it, but is there rigor? So, for example, a narrative analysis may have an N of 1, 2, 3, okay? Is that rigor? Well, maybe for a narrative analysis, that would be rigor. If you're doing a grounded theory, it wouldn't be enough, okay? So within qualitative research, there's still not a one-size-fits-all. You look at, okay, based on the research design, based on the worthy topic, research design, how am I going to ensure rigor? Okay. Another thing you want to look at that she brings up is sincerity. I spelled that incorrectly. See what I can do here. Made a mess, but that's okay. Sincerity. Okay? Sincerity. So am I true? All right? Am I going to say I'm perfect, and if I find some data that contradicts, am I going to say I'm not going to include that data? Of course not. If I find a problem, I'm going to address the problem in presenting the data. Okay? I think that sometimes in qualitative research and in social sciences research, we feel like we failed when we don't find something. And it's true that in certain circumstances that may not be a publishable work. I like to borrow from the hard sciences, though. In hard sciences, you may fail to reject the null, and still publish the piece in a dissertation or an article. It still furthers the knowledge base. So no matter what, ethically, we need to, look at that sincerity and honesty and truth. We need to look at credibility. Did we design the research to be believable and credible? And honestly, I'm going to asterisk this because we're going to go back to that in the evaluation strategies as the umbrella, okay, and I'm just going to put an umbrella that we're going to use, okay, when we talk about evaluation strategies, okay? Another thing we're going to look at, resonance. This may seem a little squishy to some of you, but does the piece resonate? Does it resonate? And if you play a musical instrument, a good guitar sound resonates to you. What that means is I can relate to it. I feel it, okay? It's true, all right? Does it make, and I'm going to use the word significant here because Tracy does, but what I want to talk about is, does it make a significant contribution? I don't mean significant in terms of quantitative analysis. Significant means something a little bit different there in terms of measure, but does it make a contribution to the field? Are we going to discover anything? Okay, is this something that we are going to use to push our knowledge forward about a particular topic issue? Okay. And then I think these are really big things, okay? I think, as she notes, we look at our ethical responsibilities. I'm just going to use the word responsibilities. Have we cared for our participants? Okay? We have the researcher as the instrument, and so we have an ethical obligation to make sure that we understand the values that we bring, researcher as instrument, caring for our participants, bracketing our biases and those kinds of things. And there's one other thing that Tracy talks about, and to me it's just another element on the list, but to me it's really important, and that is meaningful coherence. Meaningful coherence. And what that means is that everything ties together. One of the reasons your research design is important is to make sure that you've got the common thread. Everything is consistent throughout. Okay? It ties together. So for example, why did you pick the participants you did? We're looking at methodology now, but why did that happen? How many? Why? Okay. Why did you use these documents for triangulation? Does everything fit together? And to me, tying that back to the philosophical assumptions that we have about qualitative research and being consistent in research design, that doesn't mean that things aren't going to go wrong. Qualitative research is messy, right? We're committed to an emergent design. We're going to bring sincerity to the process, and what that means is we're going to report things that don't fit as well as things that fit. Okay, we're not going to ignore those things. We're going to acknowledge and bracket our biases. There are all kinds of things. But what's happening here is we have this coherence that ties everything together. Okay, part of that then we're going to talk about in terms of research design, also evaluation. Okay? But how do we know we have coherence? We're going to go back to that credibility issue here in the next section and look at how do we do it? I mean, all these things are great, but how does it happen? So we're going to talk about evaluation strategies that you're going to find helpful to use in a qualitative study. Well, now comes the part that probably you'll find the most practical in terms of applying it to a qualitative research study. We're going to talk about evaluation strategies. What can you do? I mean, we've talked about the philosophical kinds of things or the conceptual things that will make your study, in terms of evaluation, true, trustworthy. But let's look at the evaluation strategies that you can use, okay? So I'm just going to put evaluation strategies. And you're not going to necessarily use all of these evaluation strategies in every qualitative piece. If you look back at this meaningful coherence and this rigor idea, you're going to choose based on what kind of study you're doing. Okay, what are the possibilities? What can I get? What's reasonable? So let's first talk about some of the things that you probably will include. Okay, and one of these is thick description. Thick description, okay? As you are taking field notes, as in the case study that you're doing, as you take your notes, you're observing, you're taking in, you're contextualizing, you're putting layers and layers and layers of context, okay? Things you observe, things you smell, see, taste, hear, okay? That might not always be the case, but you're putting yourself in the environment and you're recording those things and writing those things so that when you present your study, you have thick description, okay? So if you do thick description, your reader can understand contextually, this is where the study lives, okay? A reader could then say, wow, my situation is similar. And I know that based on thick description. It's used in qualitative research. It's used a lot, of course, in anthropology and some other fields as well. Thick description, all right? Another thing that you're going to be looking at is prolonged engagement. And of course, what comes to mind first to me is anthropology, in terms of like, okay, I'm going to immerse myself. I'm researcher's instrument. I'm going to be engaged for a prolonged period of time with my case, with the people I'm studying, okay, whatever I happen to be studying. This also has a lot to do with gaining entree into a community. Now, a lot of you are researching or have researched communities that you're already a part of. You've already gained entree into that community, okay? And so in this prolonged engagement, you're already there, right? But then that next step is saying, do I understand other people's experiences within this community, not just my experiences, okay? And that's really the only way you can do that is prolonged engagement. Be committed to that. In the quick study that you did for this semester, of course, prolonged engagement is possible to a certain extent. But the fact that you have entree into the community that you're researching makes a big difference here, okay? Okay. Another thing that you want to think about, or another strategy, is member checks. Member checking. There's a lot of different qualitative strategies right now. And at the very least, member checking would mean saying, okay, I'm going to interview somebody. I'm writing up the transcript, all right? I've interviewed them. I'm writing up the transcript. I'm going to send that transcript back to that participant and have that person go over it, okay? And make comments or additions or no, you didn't do this right, or you know what, I'd really like to talk to you again, because that will happen as well. You don't have to do it as an individual. You can do it as a focus group. There are all kinds of qualitative, as I said before, there are all kinds of qualitative strategies. There's a possibility that your participant is going to be a co-researcher with you. So for example, in photo elicitation, you give your participants a camera and a journal, and they keep a journal on the topic or the phenomenon that they're a part of, or that you're researching, and they take photographs and, bring back the camera if that's kind of old school, but take pictures on iPhone or whatever. However you're going to get that together, but making that participant aware and a part of it, and that has a lot to do with the ethical things you're going to do as well. Another thing that's pretty easy to do, and most qualitative pieces do this, and that is triangulation. Triangulation of your data, okay? Of data in general, okay? What does that mean? That means that, yes, you're gaining data by interviewing, right? You're interviewing participants and you're getting data. But in a lot of the qualitative strategies you're going to use, you're also going to say, is that true? Because a lot of you will have access to documents, okay? Documents, information, history, and you'll take that information and you'll say, okay, I've got the records of what's happening, I've got the history, and I have maybe another piece of information. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that together and say, does that now match with my interview data? Does it all come together? Okay. There are two strategies that you may or may not use in evaluation, particularly if you're working by yourself. Okay. And one of those is the idea that, you could do this, and there's not a problem with doing it by yourself, but this idea of an audit trail. Okay. And I think you can do that in a structured way. Every time you do something or make a decision, you write it down, and you could do that in Excel if you wanted to, but a lot of people do that in their reflexive journals. And if you do it in your reflexive journal and you write down the decisions you make, you always have that kind of trail or backtrack back, okay? Now, what I'm saying in terms of you may not be able to do this, but sometimes, as the Creswell and Poth book suggests, you can have another person coming in there to help you with your audit trail, okay? There's another evaluation strategy that you probably, again, won't use if you're working by yourself, okay? But that is then a peer review, okay? And I'm going to put peer review down here. See if it fits down here. What I mean by peer review, if, let's say, you're working on a big project and it's grant funded, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll have multiple coders for the data. Okay? So you come together and say, are we seeing the same things? Okay? There's nothing wrong with bringing somebody in to help you and kind of saying, am I thinking about this straight? These are the categories I've found. These are the themes that are emerging and so forth. But most of us who are doing individual research, like on a dissertation, we don't have as much access to that. So to tell you the truth, what I see in terms of like doing a dissertation, record of study, article by yourself would be definitely thick description, prolonged engagement as much as humanly possible, reasonably possible, member checking, and then triangulation, all right? You may not even choose all of those, but those are readily handy and very well recognized. What that's going to look like in terms of which ones you choose and how deep to go with each one of them honestly depends on the type of qualitative research you're doing. Are you doing an ethnography? Are you doing a grounded study research piece? Are you doing a case study? So I've spoken very generally about evaluation, okay, and how to be trustworthy, and what that looks like in terms of the big tent criteria as far as conceptually what you're going for, and then also the evaluation strategies. But bear in mind that meaningful coherence, okay, or that idea of the research design and the way that you follow your philosophical assumptions in the design and the evaluation of a piece, you're going to choose, okay, based on what's happening. That you're going to draw that line from the philosophical assumptions throughout the data gathering process all the way to the evaluation, and then you've done it right.